This talk will answer three questions for us. What is the theosophical doctrine of reincarnation of karma? What is the relationship between reincarnation, karma, and the divine? And finally, if reincarnation and karma and the divine have a relationship, are reincarnation and karma merciful and just if they are divine laws of life? So let's begin with the first question. What is the theosophical doctrine of reincarnation? Basically, it comes down to the understanding that they are two aspects of one law, and that law is the law of periodicity. Now, we say it has two aspects because we can see this law operating in all departments of nature in one of two ways. We can see as it operating as cycles in the periodic repetition of events, and we can also see it operating as the periodical or cyclical return of every impression to the point of its origin. That's the law. Now, we can study that law in the method of science by going from particulars to universals. So we see in every department of nature, return of impressions, repetition of events, re-embodiment, action, reaction, cause and effect. And we can also see those same laws operating in the physical, emotional, mental, moral, and spiritual experience of every human being. So as scientists, we can gather all those particulars and come to a general conclusion that reincarnation and karma are laws of life because they are in themselves cyclical and based on cause and effect. Now, we can also study this from universals to particulars, which is the method of philosophy. Remembering, Theosophy is a religious, scientific, and philosophical. So going from universals to particulars, we can start with the proposition that periodicity, re-embodiment, cause and effect is a universal principle that applies to every individual immortal human soul. The experience then of every soul is a countless series of incarnations in a mortal body that are different and temporary. Different bodies, different personalities that are mortal and temporary. And also that the conditions, the experiences, the qualities of each body are the result and reaction of previous causes and actions of that individual soul, either in this life or a previous one. So that's if we go from universals to particulars. And in doing this, we come up with three key features of the law of re-embodiment and karma, or action and reaction. One is that these laws are universal. They apply to all beings. The second conclusion we come to is that these laws operate impartially. In other words, they unerringly operate on all beings without favoritism or malice. The law doesn't side, I'm going to do a particular favor for you, and I'm going to be particularly against you. It's not capricious in that way. And also, it's impersonality. Its operation is not directed by a single supreme divine being. It is in fact independent of all beings, and yet all beings experience it, and it works through all beings that are manifested. So it takes a manifested being to experience it, but a manifested being of whatever degree, no supreme being directs it or controls it. It's an impersonal, universal law of nature. So having answered the question of what Theosophy teaches about reincarnation and karma, let's look at the relationship between reincarnation, karma, and the divine. So, but we first have to consider, what does Theosophy mean by the divine? So Theosophy puts forth this proposition that deity is one universal, unmanifested, undifferentiated, eternal, and absolute. Now, what does that word absolute mean? It means that deity is not conditioned or definable. It is beyond conditions or definition. It is infinite. That means it is nowhere. You can't say deity dwells here. And it is everywhere at the same time. It is eternal. It has no beginning. It has no ending. And here's an interesting thing, sometimes a stumbling block. It is changeless. And what that means is that it cannot directly influence or interact with any manifested being, because if it did, it would cease to be changeless. In order to interact and to have a relationship, there has to be change. So it's changeless. And yet, it's ceaseless in its abstract, inherent motion. Because periodically, we see that abstract, inherent motion manifest, which can only be described as a great breath, an outbreathing and an inbreathing, or day and night. And when we have the outbreathing, the day, the entire universe of solar system, worlds, beings comes forth into manifestation from the unknown darkness. And when we have the night, or the inbreathing, that entire manifestation returns into the one. So there's this ceaseless end, beginning and ending of universes and solar systems without any beginning or ending. So there has to be, within that deific principle, ceaseless motion. And yet, it is not changed by whatever manifests or influenced by it. Something to think about. So it cannot be a being, because whatever being we imagine in our minds has some kind of limitation, some kind of relationship, some type of limitation in space, if not time. So we might say it is beingness, the one eternal, unmanifested reality behind whatever manifested being there is. We call it beingness because it is the unmanifested reality behind all beings that manifest it. So what then we might say is, why is it called a divine principle, a deific principle? Because it is universal in one, it's impersonal, it's impartial, meaning it's absolute. That's why we say it's a divine deific principle. It's beginning to sound a lot like karma and reincarnation. Interesting, because they, we have said, are universal. impartial, impersonal. So what does this mean? It means that they are divine laws of life. Reincarnation and karma inherently, in their divine essence, are one with deity. They share the same quality, if we wanted to put it, divine quality. And when they manifest, when they become observable, we see that they still maintain that divine quality. They are impersonal, they are impartial, and they are universal. So we call them divine principles. Now, those that believe in a supreme being, one of the attributes they give to the supreme being, besides it being all-knowing and all-powerful, is it's all-merciful, all-compassionate, all-loving, and all-just. So we can ask, is karma and reincarnation merciful and just if they are divine laws of life? So karma has been described as the law of laws because in its operation, it is universal harmony and equilibrium, which is actually on the observable plane of manifestation, the expression of that unknown, omnipresent, unobservable unity and oneness of all, which is the deific principle. It's the manifestation, harmony is the manifestation of oneness. And it operates to restore, we see it operating to restore balance and harmony wherever it is disturbed. And so karma and reincarnation, we're going to talk about karma first. Karma is just and merciful, and for three reasons. It compensates the actions of every human being who creates, preserves, and restores that equilibrium, who works with the law. Now, we in our human minds say it rewards, but it does not actually reward. It reacts, it adjusts. If you work with that universal harmony, it responds in a way that benefits the one who is the servant of it. You are a co-worker with nature. So it is just. And it compensates for the experiences we might have of the actions of others who, in their error, have thrown our lives into disharmony, dis-ease, pain, and suffering. So we all know that we suffer and experience pain at the hands of others' actions. And it throws us into discord, disharmony, dis-ease. And so there is that universal law that compensates the individual who perceives that and gives them the opportunity to balance that out, to experience in some way the influence that will bring their inner nature into accord and balance again. So it is merciful, but it is also merciful to the perpetrator, the one who has caused that suffering and that harm to others, because it adjusts those actions that produce disharmony by bringing that disturbance back to the being who was the original of the disturbance. And while that adjustment may be experienced or perceived as the perpetrator, as punishment or suffering, it is in fact merciful. It is unerring in that it brings to the perpetrator, the one who set up the disturbance, in direct proportion to the suffering that one has caused others. So we learn what we have done to others by experiencing that pain and disturbance in our own lives at some point. We get to know what it feels like because in our original action, we had no idea that we were doing it. We may not have meant it, we may have consciously done it, but we did something to upset the balance, and so we need the lesson. So it is the merciful teacher that gives the perpetrator of the action the opportunity again and again until the lesson is learned. And that's the point. That's what makes it just and merciful. It's not, you have to learn this now and you're never going to learn it. It gives it to us again and again until the individual begins to act in harmony with the divine law of life from which they had deviated. And reincarnation is the doctrine of hope based on that divine justice and mercy, as it provides countless experiences and opportunities under law for the continued progress, learning, and readjustment of every being in their march towards unification in wisdom and action, knowledge and action toward the divine. So through this law of reincarnation or re-embodiment, no one, no thing, and no being is left out. No being or thing is left behind, and no one or being is left to eternal suffering. So this is truly a divine law of compassion and mercy.